Hi friends! So today, I wanted to give my opinions on all the sets and modules that we have in the game and how I personally think about it, and I couldn't think of a better way but to just put it in a tier list like thing. But this is what I think about the sets and how they are supposed to be used, what their functions are, all that kind of stuff. So without further ado, this is what I have, right? So on the top, we have everyone can use this. So basically this set is just extremely universal. Everyone can use this set. Everyone actually likes this set, but sometimes you have to stray away from it because you need to fit in other sets for that specific, archetype or role that you want that unit to be in. Then we have the best in slot for DPS. I think we already know what most of the sets are going to be in there. Same with the healers and the support. And then we have the best in slot for PvE. Okay? But if it's not in the best in slot for PvE, usually you can just use it in PvP as well. Okay? So that's how I'm thinking about all the modules and stuff like that. So let's get into it. The first one we have here is Onslaught. Alright? And I think Onslaught, we don't even have to talk much about it. It's the best in slot for DPS. Alright? Is it the best for DPS? Not really, okay? Because there are other sets that are better than it. And what Onslaught does is it has a 4, 8, and 12 set. That's why it's pretty damn good because you can use it as a secondary piece if that's what you really want to do. Or you can use its full 12 set, which gives you 45% extra attack. Alright? And we know that attack is how you get damage in for DPSs, so that's why it's a best in slot for DPS, especially in the early game. You're going to need Onslaught for a lot of your units before you can even start farming, for like your Keen Eyes and stuff like that. And so that's why I will put it there. Now, Harvest, all right? Harvest is going to be another DPS part that you're going to have, and that's mainly going to be farm from Doki. And you can use this as a 4-piece. You can also use this as an 8-piece. And if you use it as an 8-piece, basically you get to ignore more defenses if the opponent has 50% or more HP. And so, why is it good? It's because this is how you're also going to get extra attack. This is how you're also going to get more damage. And when you're in Doki, you're going to be farming a lot of Swift Rush. And for you to get damage plus speed, you're going to be using, Harvest as your secondary set. Alright? And for the endgame, Harvest is also pretty damn good for units that likes to do, bursty damage. Alright? Because you get to ignore 30% more defense if the opponent has more HP, so you get them down to critical health life, which is important, right, to finish off certain units. So that's why it's also a best in slot. Fury is also another one that you can get from, Aurora. And what they do is, it's also an 8-piece, but it functions differently from Harvest. So with Fury, you get attack as well, but you also get, more damage if you land a crit, which means this set is more reliant on you having, 100% crit rate. And if you don't have 100% crit rate, you cannot actually proc Fury. So that's why it is in Aurora, because Aurora is an endgame farm. And when you're in the endgame, you're already starting to hit, the 85 to 100% crit rate threshold. So if you had to choose between Harvest and Fury, it's up to you what you want to do. If you want to do more damage consistently, Fury is probably the better one. But if you want to do bursty amount of damage from, taking an opponent from 100 to 30% or 100 to 0, sometimes in the case of Messiah, you can do that. Harvest is probably going to be better. Okay? Next. Now, Momentum. To me, Momentum is the ultimate piece. Okay, let me just put it here. If I can actually move it around, there we go. Why is that? Why is Momentum actually the best piece for a DPS? Very simple. Because it's a 6 or 12 piece, and if it's a 6 piece, it gives you 12% crit rate. Now, crit rate in this game is extremely hard to get, and there's only a few ways you can get it, either through your subs, either through your right side main stat, or through your shell passive. Okay? And the fact that in your shell, your passive too is also the one that gives you crit and speed, you ideally want the speed over the crit rate. Right? And if you're going to go down that route, that means you have to get it from your set, you have to get it from your substat, and you have to get it from your main stat. And that is how you're going to be hitting 100% crit rate. Now, I have PTSD about not critting because in the EWS, I had a 79% crit rate Messiah that missed crit twice, which cost me the game. So to me now, Momentum is arguably the best set in the game for me. in terms of getting crit rate on your DPS. Now, there is a separate effect. If you get the 12 set effect, you're going to get, more damage depending on how many debuffs your opponent have, up to 36%, which is also very good. Okay? Don't get me wrong. In this game, you're going to do a lot of stuff like, let's say you're using a Heinrich that strips, puts buff block, puts last words, puts wound, all that stuff. That's already considered damage instead of just debuffs, especially when you're using your DPS to follow up after Heinrich. Okay? Now, this is why I'm putting this as like the ultimate best set for any DPS, because of the crit rate. Okay? That is my main reason. Keen Eye. Keen Eye is also somewhere here, and that's because it gives you crit damage. Now, when you're building a DPS, alright, a lot of the time you want your right side to be crit rate, crit damage, attack. Okay? A healthy spread of, substats for your damage dealers. Okay? Not substats, main stats. But what Keen Eye does is it gives you extra crit damage. Okay? This is how you can stack crit damage. And Keen Eye is only good if you can crit, because crit damage is heavily reliant on you having 100% crit. If you cannot crit, you are not taking crit damage multipliers advantage, if that makes sense. And so this is why Keen Eye is here. It's the second best because its 12 piece set is also damn good, which also gives you more damage for multi-hitters. So you get to an extra 25%, then 15%, then 5%. Great. Okay? But if you're only going to be, a single target damage dealer, then you're only going to get the 25%, which means you're not going to get a whole lot of, damage amplification. And at that point, sometimes even Onslaught can be better. Okay? Fury Edge. Now, Fury Edge is going to be here. It's not the worst piece, but it's because it's a specialized core that basically gives you crit rate and crit damage. This is how you're going to hit your crit rate threshold. Okay? Or your crit damage threshold. Putting Fury Edge onto your DPS is quite important because you need to hit those subsets. I can't stress that enough. Alright? There is an argument for you to put Swift Raid on your units, but Fury Edge, if you are just there for the Omega damage, so think like units like, Hoyan, Siada, those kind of units, that you just want to heavily nuke, Fury Edge is your best friend. The Ting is another one. Okay? Now let's look at Wellspring. Now Wellspring is everyone can use this. Okay? If you are struggling to survive in PvE in the early game, Wellspring is there to give you more HP, which means more bulk. You can, soak up more damage. But everyone can use this set. If you are a healer, you can use it. If you're a support, you can use it. If you are a HP scaling DPS, you can use it. If you're a damage dealer, you can still use this to, survive and take more turns because you're now alive for a lot longer and do more damage. So I'm going to put it up there. Besides that, Wellspring might be very useful in the future. In PvP right now, a lot of people are not using Wellspring. Okay? But it's still something that you keep in mind that no matter whether you get DPS substats on your Wellspring or you get, support substats on your Wellspring, both of them work just fine. Cure is basically a cure set, so I don't really have to talk much about it. It also gives you HP. Alright, so if you're looking for just some HP, you can use it as, like a 4-piece set. That's fine. Alright? Now, Evil Guard is basically a healing specialized core, and there's not much to talk about it except that you're going to get more healing out of it, and you're going to get effect resistance, okay? And healers need effect resistance because if you get CC'd, your healers get CC'd, they're not healing, you're not doing shit, alright? So, there is an argument for you to, forego Cure and just go with Evil Guard for most of your healers, understandable. But if you pair them together, you just get a whole lot more healing. Alright? Now, Unbreakable. Alright? Unbreakable is also something that everyone can use. If you need more if you are using a defense scaling damage dealer, you can use this. If you just need more tank, alright, so you already have, your tank stats, your HP all up to scratch, you can just use Unbreakable on your units. That's fine. You can even use it as a 4-piece, an 8-piece, or a 12-piece. Doesn't really matter. Okay? It's a different thing for Onslaught because Onslaught is basically for damage. All right, your DPS can only benefit from it. Your healers and support cannot benefit from it. But Unbreakable and Wellspring, both everyone can benefit from it. Even the DPS can use it. All right. If you go 888, that's also something you can think about. All right. Bramble. Bramble is also a very universal piece in my opinion, because think about units like, Sanya. If Sanya procs a counterattack, she gets 30% turn meter push. If, any unit counterattacks, they get more damage in, basically. So a DPS can use it, a healer can use it, a support can use it. All right. Bloodbath. Now, Bloodbath is your best in slot for supports. Okay. Why is that? It's because you are getting a lot more damage mitigation out of Bloodbath, plus effect resistance. That means, you are naturally getting effect resistance, which lowers your opponent's proc rate. So that is a good thing. Now, Bloodbath is very, very strong, especially if you're playing a whole bunch of tanks. Tanks are not there to, do a significant amount of damage. They're there to bruise most of the time, or to provide some kind of support capability. And so if they can survive long enough, they are able to out-sustain the DPS. That's what you want. Okay? Colossal Guard. Now, Colossal Guard is a defensive piece, and so it's going to be, part for your heal. It's going to be a best support slot for your supporters. All right? Not much to talk about them. All right? You can see the Evil Guards, all the specialized core are very, very specialized in like giving you certain substats. Okay? And that's what the game intends you to do. Swift Rush. Everyone can use this. I don't have to talk much about it. It's the speed set. Everyone from any gear grinder game knows that speed is king. You want speed on most of your units. All right. You can use it as an 8-piece. You can use it as a 4-piece. If you just need that little bit of speed on your unit, you can use it as an 8-piece. All right. Chances are you want the full 12. If you're using it on like your initiators, your first turn movers, that kind of stuff, then you'll probably want most of your speed from here. All right. If not, you can just use it as an 8-piece. Like I have my Messiah on a, Keen Eye, Swift Rush, Fury Edge, White Fang, right? Because I just need 8 speed on him. And if I have 8 speed on, if I have the 8-piece set speed on him, he gets to move and he gets to do damage. So that's why everyone can use it. All right. Now, Bulwark. Bulwark is also something everyone can use. All right. Not just your DPS, but your healers and your support. There will come a time, all right, I'm going to say this out loud. There will come a time when CC is going to overtake the entire meta, okay? And when that happens, it is going to be mandatory that every single unit has Bulwark on them, all right? If not, you're just going to get turn 1 CC and then you're not going to have fun, okay? This happened in Epic 7 when Dizzy came out in E7. It became a mandatory thing that everybody ran Bulwark, all right, or immunity set in that game, okay? And I am not surprised that that can also happen in Etheria Restart, where there will be a CC unit that comes out that is going to, create a mandate for every single unit to be on Bulwark. Will happen, can happen, okay? So if you are farming Bulwark, no matter if it's a DPS piece, no matter if it's a healing piece, it can even be a shit piece. Keep it, roll it. Okay? Now, Strife. I want to say that Strife is best in slot for supporters. And why is that? Because number 1, it gives defense. Number 2, every time someone hits you, you get a turn meter push by 10%. Alright? Now, you're building your supports relatively tanky. Correct? And if you're building your supports relatively tanky, that means they don't have a lot of speed. And for you to counteract that, what you're going to do is you're trying to cheat the turn meter progression, all right? And that is through Strife. Usually people want to take out the supporters first, all right? If you know that the DPS has already, blew their load, the DPS is now on cooldown, they want to get rid of the supporter, because if the supporter keeps the DPS alive, you're fucked, correct? And so what is the best way to punish them? You want to put Strife on them, right? If they touch you, the payoff is you get to move, all right? And if you take more turns, you turn cycle more, you get your S3 back, suddenly your DPS is now alive. Okay? Time Weave. Time Weave is best in slot for PvE. Okay? If you want to use this in PvP, you're most likely going to be using it as a 8-piece. Alright? Why is that? It's because it gives you effect accuracy. Sometimes you just don't want to use your main stat on effect accuracy. So the other way that you can cheat it out is through Time Weave. Alright? Using it as an 8-piece. Now the cooldown is very, very good for PvE because you're going to be in there for a long ass fight, and the longer the game goes, the more chances of you proccing Time Weave, the more chances of you succeeding. Okay? But most of the time, if you're going to be using it in PvP, you're going to be using it as, a supplementary piece. That means it's going to be just for the effect accuracy. Alright? Swift Raid. Swift Raid everyone can use. Alright? And while we're on the topic, Swift Smite everyone can use as well. Why is that? It's because it gives you speed, an extra 15% speed, and one of them gives you attack, and the other one gives you effect accuracy. So it depends on what you really want to do. For example, if you are running, let's say, a Lily, ideally you want to put her on Swift Smite. Okay? Why is that? It's because when she S3, there is a chance to cool down your opponent's skills. Okay? You can use Swift Raid if you want to do more damage, but that's when you have to think about what the unit wants to do and how they want to function. Okay? Most of your DPS are going to be on Swift Raid. Most of your supporters are going to be on Swift Smite. But at the end of the day, because these are specialized cores, they don't drop very often and they only come in Inferno. Depends on where you farm most. If you farm a lot of Doki and you get a lot of Swift Raid, then you're going to be playing Swift Raid. If you're going to be playing Aurora and you're a Aurora gamer and you get a lot of Swift Smite, then you're going to be using a lot of Swift Smite. Okay? Effect accuracy and effect resistance in this game is not a bad stat. It used to be a bad stat in most games, but this one, it helps you increase your proc chance. Okay? So for example, let's say Swift Smite on Tiamat. Your S3 taunts. That can actually win you the game if you AoE taunt someone. Alright? Because you're going to hit Tiamat. You're going to make her go down in HP. She is going to, get a lot of bloodshed stacks. She's going to turn into dragon form and ruin your day. And you have basically lost an entire rotation. Alright? Just to give you an example here. Now, Battle Wheel. Battle Wheel is probably best in slot for PvE. And why is that? It's because it gives you a chance to proc your S1 again. Alright? Think about Shadow Sanya, for example. A Shadow Sanya, if you are lucky enough to proc your S1 through Battle Wheel, you have just gained yourself an extra 2 dots. And that 2 dots is basically 8% of the boss's max HP, which is great. Okay? Whether you would use it in PvP, hard to say right now. Right now, the meta doesn't allow for it. And if you're doing it, it's probably because you're using it as an offset to get just the 10% attack. Alright? That's fine, but I think that Battle Wheel is the best in slot for PvE. Alright, and the last one that we have here is Ether Plague. Now, Ether Plague is probably the best in slot for support. Alright, and why is that? It's because it gives you HP and it also gives you effect accuracy. Your supporters can come in the form of a lot of things. It can come in the form of a tank, it can come in the form of a CC. And both of them can actually benefit from the HP and the effect accuracy. Alright? And that is how I look at all the pieces when I get them. When I get a piece and when I'm farming something and I get a piece, this is what I think for. I think, alright, is this the best in slot for what? What is the best in slot for this set? What can I do with it? Then I look at the subset. If the subset shit, okay, then it goes. But I just thought I'd let you guys see how I think about all these sets, because eventually when I start doing more character guides, you guys can understand why I do so. And if you guys don't know, I do character guides as well. And eventually I'm going to be talking about some PvE guides, alright? Once the game completely settles, everything is all, working as intended already, I'm going to create an entire PvE guide telling you all the functions and all the bosses, how to beat it, what sets to put on them, and now you know why I think of it like that. Alright? But that's the video, guys. If you guys like this content, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Catch you guys in the next one.